Okay, all right, let me try this again. All right, so, hi everybody, I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club.
Okay, so we are in the middle of March 1966, which is really kind of right in the middle of peak Marvel here, or at least peak Silver Age Marvel. And we will get some of that in this episode and other stuff.
Yes. Well, we're going to begin right now with one of the most beloved Marvel comics of all time.
Yes, possibly the best 3-part story that Marvel has at least produced in this entire decade, if not ever. So,
yes.
But as you pointed out last time, it does have this weird starting in the middle of the first issue and ending in the middle of the third issue kind of thing, which, we got to deal with, but that's the way things are.
Yeah, it's so strange. Why would they do that? It was only a brief period in which, as you pointed out, it's just Kirby who's doing this. This switch to starting stories in the middle of the month. He only does this for a couple months, and it just so happens that, unfortunately, it happens to the Galactus storyline. You can tell they don't know what to put on the cover. Like, you would think on the cover of this issue, they would show, when last we saw, we had the Inhumans against Maximus and the Atmo gun. And it's odd not to mention that on the cover, but instead they devote the cover to the second half. Well, it's neither Silver Surfer nor Galactus make it out of the cover. Instead, we have the Watcher looking very weird. Like Watcher, never on model, always looks weird. But this is one of the weirdest looks we've ever seen on the Watcher, with, as you've called it, core shadow on his face. Mm-hmm. It's very strange. And we have him just saying that something is coming, and it says the coming of Galactus, but we don't see Galactus or Silver Surfer on the cover.
Yes, and everybody, including the Fantastic Four and seemingly everyone in New York, is looking up into a red sky, seemingly with dread.
Yes.
So, yes, the coming of Galactus. But we start out right where we left off with the Fantastic Four sort of battling the Inhumans, but also battling with the Inhumans against Maximus. So, the credits here. The fateful vibrations have started thanks to Maximus, and also thanks to Stan Lee, writer without peer, Jack Kirby, penciler of the year, Joe Sinnott, inker most sincere, Artie Simek, how'd he get in here? So,
yes.
Maximus, the evil brother of Black Bolt, who is king of the Inhumans, had usurped the throne, and now at this point, when he is being sent back to his rightful place, he turns on the Atmo gun, which is supposed to do something to the atmosphere that will kill, presumably, all regular humans and leave the Earth for the Inhumans to inherit. The Atmo gun is starting to destroy things. There is, more of a confrontation between the Inhumans and Maximus.
Yes, so then they go to confront Maximus, and they're going like, oh, too late, I've already turned the gun. I have killed off all humans, only Inhumans are left alive. And then Medusa is like, no, let's go ahead and pull up on this video monitor video footage of some random street, seemingly in New York, of all the humans have been knocked down a little bit, but then they're getting up again. This proves that humans and Inhumans are the same, and that your gun didn't work, because we now know that we're not that different from humans. And if it doesn't kill us, it's not going to kill them either. I'm like, who installed this camera that is showing just life on the streets of New York?
It just seems to be technology that seems to be generally available, not maybe to the general public, but to people who have super tech, to just be able to have a camera that just can show you anywhere on the planet. Yes. That's just something we see a lot. So that's what I'm guessing this is.
Yes, but so then they realize, oh, no wonder the Atmo gun didn't work. We are human too. It is only our powers that are different.
But then Maximus
gets away.
Yeah, then Maximus breaks free from them and goes and finds the Atmo gun once again, and he says, by reversing the charge on my Atmo gun, I can create a negative zone around our land, a zone that nothing can penetrate. The victory shall still be mine, for I am Maximus the Magnificent. That's a great panel, by the way, with just some fantastic Kirby tech and a great perspective angle. But I believe this is the first time we've seen the term negative zone used in the Marvel Universe. However, this is not the negative zone that becomes a regular location in Marvel history going forward. It is something called a negative zone, which ends up essentially creating some sort of unpassable barrier.
I occasionally check in with the Marvel indexes they published in the 80s to read what they have to say about these issues. And they tie themselves into knots trying to explain the extremely complicated history of the terms negative zone versus subspace and how they get used and misused and misapplied. And yes, so we are going to have this barrier now put up around the Inhumans that is going to remain until issue 60, 13 issues from now, and will be called the negative zone. Meanwhile, right around that time, we're getting to know the real negative zone, which is at first called subspace, even though subspace is supposed to be something different that we have already seen. And then we are finally going to get all the terminology straight in about 2 or 3 years, when we will determine that, no, this barrier around the Inhumans should never have been called the negative zone. But they will eventually figure that out.
Yeah, because I think it's an FF51, maybe, where we see the actual negative zone that you and I knew from the 80s.
But they call it subspace. Yeah.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah.
But it's clearly what we remember seeing. So anyway, this negative zone is going to enclose the so-called Great Refuge, meaning that no one can go in or go out. Johnny and Crystal, of course, who are teenagers in love with each other, don't want to be separated. She wants to come with him. He wants to stay with her. But in the end, Thing grabs Johnny and pulls him out. So he is now separated from Crystal, and he is absolutely distraught. And there's a lot of sympathy for him. The Thing feels terrible for being the one who had to pull him out involuntarily. But, he's like, I did the right thing, but yeah, this is terrible. So somehow they're able to get liftoff on that commercial jetliner once again. There must be some runway they were able to use in the Andes Valley there. So they're flying away. On the bottom of page 7, I would say that is once again some proto-Kirby crackle down there on panel 5. And it is our first glimpse of the Silver Surfer. We see a tiny little picture of him. Next panel, we see him a little bit better. He is a silver man on a silver surfboard flying through space, seeming to just be an adventurer, an explorer out here.
They not only don't give Silver Surfer and Galactus a whole issue to themselves to be introduced, they don't even give him a whole page to himself to be introduced. They're wrapping up the Inhuman storyline in the top 4 panels of the page, and then we first meet Silver Surfer on the bottom of a page in which another storyline is wrapped up. So you would hope that he could, just for the purposes of reprinting all this, that they could introduce him on his own page, but they do not. But I gotta say, it's intriguing that the Silver Surfer isn't wearing any underwear on this page. He's just a silver dude. Later, sometimes he'll be shown as wearing little silver underwear, which I never like. I always like him a lot better as just a naked dude.
We get an idea of what we're in for when, as the Silver Surfer passes the Skrull Empire's home system, the Emperor or maybe not the Emperor, but somebody in the observation room that sees that it's the Silver Surfer that's approaching, orders the entire solar system blacked out. So apparently they're just like, everybody on every planet, turn off every light and every machine. We need to have these things look uninhabited. And apparently it works this time. Doesn't work so well later in the 80s. Have you heard any stories about the meeting between Jack and Stan where the Silver Surfer first came up as a concept? The story I have heard is that, and this also, if this is true, gives us some insight into how their storytelling synergy worked. That Stan had presumably talked with Jack and said, okay, we're going to create this villain called Galactus. He's going to eat planets, yada, 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 and then basically sends Jack off to go ahead and come up with concept sketches or something like that. So Jack comes back with a drawing of what Galactus is going to look like with this little dude on a silver board up over his shoulder flying around. And Stan says, what's this? And Jack's like, he seems like a big, important guy. Seems like he should have some kind of a herald or something like that who comes and announces his presence. And so, therefore, the Silver Surfer was born. And Stan Lee absolutely fell in love with the character. Now, this is also important because in the context of this story, and once again, this must have come from Kirby. So, take that for what it means. This is a story from a particular perspective.
Who was suing for sole creator rights to these characters.
Yes, and I think this may have been around that time. What Kirby said was that was the moment when he sort of realized that he was creating all of this free intellectual property, basically, just for laborers' wages for this company. That he's like, wait, the Silver Surfer is a great character. And now it's suddenly kind of become Lee's character. Should I just be making these things up just to give away, just to make for piecework, basically? At least in the story as Jack Kirby and or his partisans tell it, he entirely created the Silver Surfer without any prompting or input from Stan Lee, and that this was the moment when he started to think, maybe Wally Wood was right. Maybe we shouldn't be putting up with this.
Yes.
Yeah. And the Wally Wood part I threw in just because I know that he had left just a few months earlier. And it has been, I've read various places that he was complaining to folks around there, like, don't you get that you're being exploited by all this? So,
yeah, I've heard two different versions of that story, and they get right to the whole issue of Jack partisans versus Stan partisans. And that is that I've heard one version, which is sort of the version you're saying, where they were spitballing this new character, and they were saying, oh, there's going to be this new character, Galactus, and, show me some concept drawings for Galactus. And then Jack goes ahead and does a concept drawing, and then Stan says, who's that silver guy flying around? And Jack says, I think he should have a herald called the Silver Surfer. And that is one thing. And then, but sometimes that story gets transmuted, and people are saying, like, no, Stan just said to Jack, in this issue, the Atmo Gun storyline wraps up, and then somebody named Galactus comes. And that's like all he tells him. And then Jack gives him the finished pages, completely finished pages of the issue. And Stan is like, who's the silver guy? And Jack says, oh, I decided there should be a character named the Silver Surfer, which is, more sort of the way that Ditko and Lee were working at the time, or the way that we know that Ditko and Lee were working at the time, because they said on the page that's how they were working at the time. But that's not what they said on the page about how Stan and Jack were working at the time. And is this a case where the concept sketch story is true, and then it got transmuted by the Jack partisans into a more Steve Ditko-esque version in which, no, Stan gave Jack almost nothing, and Jack came up with the whole book himself, including presenting all of the pages with the Silver Surfer as a fait accompli? Or was that the true story, and then that got transmuted by the Stan partisans into a story where it's like, well, no, okay, they were, yes, Jack came up with the Silver Surfer, but they were working on concept sketches together, and Stan actually gave Jack more than that for the actual issue of the book. This is, I think, one of the key bones of contention here. This is one of the key differences between the stories told by the Jack partisans and the Stan partisans.
Yeah, and, the version that I remember hearing was specifically that, hey, who's this little guy here on the sketch? Right.
Yeah.
So that would seem to implicate the version that I said. But, again, this is all a game of telephone over decades and many, many people. And it's not like I am, it's not like I am, it's not like I'm less than 2 or 3 degrees of separation from either of these guys, decades separated. So, yeah, we're never going to know. But it is one of those just fascinating questions that we'll never really be able to answer.
Yes, if I had a time machine, I would go back, I would kill Baby Hitler, and then I would visit the creation of the Silver Surfer and find out which of these is actually true.
Yeah, instead of killing Baby Hitler, how about kill, young adult Hitler? How about, just go and shoot him on the fields of World War I? That seems a little bit less problematic than Baby Hitler.
Okay. Well, and that way, that way I'll have cover, because we'll be like, well, clearly he was killed by an enemy bullet. You can't blame me. I can get away with it more easily.
Yes. Well, getting away with it is definitely important.
Yeah. Well, clearly Stan does fall in love with the Silver Surfer, and eventually will decide to give the Silver Surfer his own book without Kirby.
Yes.
It's unclear why Kirby was not involved in the book, but Stan, at that point, the wonderful John Buscema has joined Marvel. And Stan gives the Silver Surfer his own double-length book, which is a real artist showcase for this wonderful art, but without Kirby, with John Buscema, and then famously Stan then creates this whole backstory for Silver Surfer where he used to be human, which apparently Kirby did not like. Kirby wanted the Silver Surfer to be just a being who was created fully formed by Galactus, and thought it would therefore be more meaningful if the Silver Surfer, discovers his humanity here if he had never had any. But Lee is like, no, this is a viable character. We should give him a human backstory. And then that was sort of, I think, the reason for the creation of the Adam Warlock character is I have heard that this was Stanley going, okay, we'll go ahead and do a character your way, and we'll have a character be created, fully formed as a sort of platonic ideal of a human being, and then have that character discover his humanity.
Okay. So anyway, who knows how much of that we will be able to leave in. I actually like just about all that discussion, so we will see. So back on Earth, as they're still flying home, Thing is looking out one window that Reed, who's doing the flying, is not looking out, and he's seeing two suns, and everybody else is like, dude, Thing, I don't know what joke you're trying to tell, but we don't have anything for it right now. And he's like, okay, maybe I'm making it up. And it's like, no, dude, I'm definitely not making it up. And then the second sun, so-called, seems to expand and fill the entire sky with fire. So that's unnerving. That's probably not a good thing. So,
as Pete Campbell would say on Mad Men, not good, Bob.
So Human Torch, even though the rest of the team is like, oh, we need to figure out what's going on, he, who is trying to get his mind off of Crystal as well, goes ahead and flies out thinking, oh, well, fire can't harm me. But, of course, the people of New York think, oh, well, here's fire. There's the Human Torch. Clearly, the Human Torch is causing the skies to catch fire. Let's get him. And so then they hose him off, and the rest of the Fantastic Four has to rescue him. Now, I like this, or I don't like, or whatever. It's interesting that Stan Lee has to explain, saying, meanwhile, having retrieved their speedy jet cycle, which they had left at the airport before flying to the Great Refuge, Reed, Sue, and Ben zoom after the missing Johnny. It's like, okay, yeah, we need to explain how exactly they're on this, since last time we saw they were on a passenger jet. The Thing comes and rescues Johnny, who can't flame on at that point. The flames then turn into giant floating rocks, and then suddenly the Watcher shows up out of nowhere. Once again, the Watcher's oath is worth about 2 cents. And because, they do say, hey, aren't you supposed to not interfere with other worlds? He says, true, but the danger is too great this time. So not even like, oh, here's a loophole that I can get off on. Just, nope. Yeah, I know I'm not supposed to do that, but here you go. So
he has clearly developed a certain affection for Earth.
Yes, he very much has. He's gotten too close. So the Watcher, he was the one who was making the sky look like it was burning. He then replaces that with floating boulders, basically, like, space debris. And all of this, it turns out, is ways to try to shield the Earth from the Silver Surfer. He's trying to make sure the Silver Surfer does not see that this is a vital, growing, verdant world that is ripe for harvest. But the Watcher fails to do so. The Silver Surfer does show up, and Thing gets the drop on him and knocks him off the top of the building. But he is obviously not gone yet. Galactus's spherical ship then approaches, which is followed by another crazy Kirby collage. It's really quite nice. You see the streets of New York from high up. Then you see, presumably the spherical ship for Galactus, and then other mechanical stuff and ships coming out of it. And then the final page, we see Galactus emerge from his ship. He says, my journey is ended. This planet shall sustain me until it has been drained of all elemental life. So speaks Galactus. In this version, I presume this is the same in the original version, he is colored in either Christmas or Mexico colors. Is that
yes.
Indeed?
Red, green, and brown, and white.
Right, yes. They fix this next issue.
But also, he's got a big G on his chest. So I've said many times in this podcast that the lowest form of costume creation is putting the first letter of somebody's name on their chest. Galactus will very soon go on to be one of the all-time great character designs. But he starts off quite lame in this first appearance on the last page of this issue, with lame red, green, brown colors, bare arms, and a big G on his chest. Very quickly, they will think better of that.
How long does the G stick around?
Does it make it to the end of this storyline? I don't think it does.
Somewhere in here, the Watcher says something about basically Galactus is what he wishes to be. And in future decades, they make it clear that Galactus is a cosmic being that mortal beings can't necessarily perceive in his native way. And so he looks like whatever the people who are looking at him think he looks like. And so when he eats the Skrull homeworld, they show a picture of him looking like a giant Skrull in Galactus costume. So yeah, that could explain away the G, right? You know, it's like,
Yes.
hey, yeah, we've seen bad guys with their initials on their chest, and this guy's called Galactus. So sure, that's what we'll imagine.
It's always even sillier when the hero or villain has the first letter of their name on their chest, and this is not a character who would be speaking English. And that is very much the case here, but I just peeked ahead. Yes, the G stays on his chest throughout this entire storyline.
So this is, like I said, the first part of the, almost inarguably, I would think, the greatest 3-issue storyline of the Marvel Silver Age. And we are well on our way. Now, we did have a rocky road getting here in that we are only getting to it halfway through the issue, but I am just absolutely licking my chops to get to the next 2 issues.
Yes. Jump back in and point out a few things. I absolutely love the top of page 10 where the city is on fire, and we have a big panel taking up the top half of the page, beautifully inked by Sinan. I love the look on the lady's face. Sinan inking often makes me think of newspaper daily syndicated comic strips, which was considered to be the apotheosis of the comics form at the time. Certainly the highest paid people working in comics were working on daily newspaper strips, and Sinan is bringing a lot of that energy here. Is this the first time we've seen the Thing have to beat up a normal guy, so he just flicks him? He flicks him in a way that knocks him off his feet.
I do not know if this is the first time we've seen it, but yes, that's a good point. That is a something that we will see again in the future.
This is a fantastic issue. And I should say, a really nice wrap-up of the Inhuman storyline with a nice tragic ending of the teen lovers being separated and something that's going to create what it's going to take to break the Inhumans out of this negative zone, out of this candy shell that they are caught in, will take up a lot of the next 13 issues. That was a nice temporary ending of that storyline. And then we move into an even better storyline, which is just wonderful. And then in the end, there's another long letter, very long letter from Don McGregor, who is one of their favorite correspondents, and then will eventually become a Marvel writer not too far in the future. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to Strange Tales number 142. So once again, I think for like the third issue in a row, it's just Nick Fury on the cover. And it says in big letters, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and does not mention Doctor Strange. We just see his face in the corner box. But they clearly see S.H.I.E.L.D. as being the big selling element of this book, and they're sort of ashamed of Doctor Strange, even though Doctor Strange is absolutely killing it month after month. But not that Nick Fury is not. We have another issue where, once again, says, look out, 007, here comes Stanley Writer, our answer to Bond, Jack Kirby Penciler, our answer to Uncle, Mike DeMeo, Inker, our answer to Brand Eck, Artie Simek, Letterer, our answer to Rosen. So once again, we have Kirby doing full pencils on this book, which is just delightful. Mickey DeMeo, but they call him Mike DeMeo, does an excellent job inking in this issue. The last couple times we saw Mickey DeMeo inking, he was also finishing the penciling on Hulk, and he does better over full Kirby pencils than he does over Kirby layouts. It says, who strikes at S.H.I.E.L.D.? We have an awesome robot on the first page.
That robot is fantastic. That is one of the greatest robots I think we've seen in the Marvel Universe so far.
It's working. Did you see that draw? Nothing can get past our Wild Bill robot. And he's got 2 very different types of guns in each hand. His feet have 4 wheels on each feet that sort of spin around. And
they're like office chair casters.
Yes. And Kirby does a great job showing us this thing in motion. This is just, has nothing to do with the issue. This is just a little robot they're building at S.H.I.E.L.D. and they're experimenting with. We then catch up with the Espers. Last issue, we saw that they have 3 blindfolded people doing ESP work, and they, I guess, know that they have somehow activated another former Esper agent named Mentalo who is coming after them, but I guess they just can't do much about it. Meanwhile, Mentalo has paired up with the Fixer. They are approaching S.H.I.E.L.D. we then get more of just S.H.I.E.L.D. practicing their stuff for future issues, including a bunch of shirtless guys are attacking each other with all sorts of electronic devices to test them out. I saw you put this on our socials where Kirby has to make, we talked in our last episode about how if people wanted to communicate between Europe and America in the 60s, they were still using telegraphs. Well, here we get, if they actually wanted to make an international phone call, what it would look like. And we see Kirby being rigged up. We see Fury. I always call Fury Kirby. We see Fury being rigged up with this huge electronic device that is a harness he has to wear over his whole body to make an international phone call.
Now, I think there were intercontinental phone calls that you could make. It was just very, very expensive. I'm guessing that this is what you would have to do for a mobile phone call.
Yes.
But, yeah, okay.
Well, we then have something very interesting. It says, let's check up on our other operation involving Batroc and Inferno 42, which is the first indicate this is very rare for the Marvel Universe at this point to, there's two S.H.I.E.L.D. storylines going on two different books because Batroc and Inferno 42 are in Suspense number 75, which came out the same month. And they're acknowledging, oh yeah, there's this whole other S.H.I.E.L.D. operation that's going on over in the Captain America book. They're starting to try to have these things interact just a little bit. But we cut to Mentalo and the Fixer, who are using all sorts of insane devices to attack S.H.I.E.L.D. with, and they eventually break through. And that brings us to the end of the issue. They attack Nick Fury, they put a little face mask on him to turn them into their slave, and that is where the issue leaves off. This is an absolutely beautiful issue, absolutely beautiful, penciling by Kirby, inking by DeMeo, and who is Mike Esposito. And it is great gadget work going on at S.H.I.E.L.D. Heroes have great gadgets, the villains have great gadgets, and what happens when the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. It is a fantastic issue. I love it.
Absolutely. It's this is a really fun issue. Like you said, just the S.H.I.E.L.D. gadgetry is fantastic. I really like the duo of the Fixer and Mentalo or whatever you would want to call him. One guy has all the scientific technology stuff and the other guy can get into your brain. It's like they're very complementary in terms of what they can do together. And they both look kind of cool. It's like a buddy movie, except they're the bad guys. I'm really enjoying this. And the art, Kirby is having so much fun. The image that's on the cover is basically repeated on page 11 inside. Yeah, this is the good stuff.
Image of Fixer and Mentalo on little flying pogo stick type things, flying around, firing guns. This cover was later recreated for a Micronauts cover when Fixer and Mentalo attack there. So this would be also another cover this month, which would be homaged later.
I think that's all I had to say. Let me just double check and make sure. Oh, no.
Oh, no. Do we have more Soupy sales?
We do. Oh, damn it. You know what? I was planning on trying to get up an air horn sound to use whenever Soupy Sales came up. So at one point, Fury is saying, look, there's something taking shape on the screen right now. And the scientist says, they've all been concentrating on Mentalo. Do you think it could be him? Well, it sure as heck ain't Soupy Sales. So, yes, the year of Soupy Sales continues. I'm really glad I didn't miss that one. That I would have been really pissed at myself. And we have the first mention of the organization that would eventually come to be called AIM.
Yes.
But they are at this point we're still called them, and at this point the Fixer is essentially using them, AIM, to manufacture his gadgets for him. So he's essentially designing these things and they are helping him actually build them. And so we will be seeing more of them/AIM in coming months.
Yes, and then it's also going to be a little bit unclear who is trying to steal Inferno 42 over in Captain America. And I think that will also later be, is them the actual name of the organization, or no, we later find out it's AIM, and it's all very confusing. But this, I think, all gets eventually grouped together. But, okay, let's go and move on to the back of the book. Always excellent. Doctor Strange, Master of the Mystic Arts, Those Who Would Destroy Me. We talked about last issue about how the version I originally read ended definitively, but then when it turned out I read the original issue, it actually ended on a cliffhanger. We had the major storyline with Dormammu and Baron Mordo wrap up last month, but it turned out there were some stay-behinds who are still devoted to Baron Mordo's cause, are still fighting Doctor Strange. They have put a bomb into his brazier.
When you say a bomb, just go ahead and please define why you're calling it that.
They specifically say this is not a mystical bomb. This is not a ecto bomb. This is a just normal human bomb that we have put in his brazier, thinking he will not be able to detect that. But then this is very clever. He is like, wait a second. I scanned to see if there were any bad guys here, and it showed that the place was totally clean, but it shouldn't have been totally clean because I fought a demon here, and there should still be the aura from that here. So clearly the place has been cleaned up. Clearly someone must have been here and then cleaned up their presence, because the aura of this place is suspiciously clean, which I like a lot, that bit of plotting. Presumably on Ditko's part, but maybe made up by Lee. It says extravagantly edited and written by Stan Lee, painstakingly plotted and drawn by Steve Ditko, lovingly lettered and bordered by Artie Simek. So then Doctor Strange realizes at the last minute this bomb is here, flies out of his skylight, and throws the bomb up into the air where it explodes, but it does stun him, and the bad guys are able to then grab him and put him in a metal face mask and metal mittens, and they are keeping him prisoner. Each of us shall have a specific mission. I shall study Strange's amulet, while Mordo's helper shall examine the mysteries of his cloak. And as for you, Demon, your task shall be to probe the mind of Doctor Strange. So then they all go off.
And I will say the person who's saying that looks identical to Rorschach if his face were in shadow.
Yeah, true. So Caecilius is still not being named. Will go on to become one of the major villains of the first Doctor Strange movie, but he is still here, Mordo's Italian mustachioed goon.
He looks like one of the Gambono brothers.
Yes. So Doctor Strange is still completely masked up, mittened up. Someone comes to try to probe his mind, but fantastic art by Ditko on bottom of page 4.
Oh, yeah.
Of Strange setting his own mental probe, snaking back along the mental probe that is poking into his head. And you can really just feel these things wriggling along, these little mental snakes that are coming out of Strange's head as he then seizes control of the person who is trying to control his mind. Meanwhile, we see the female Mordo agent who has his amulet and has figured out what's going on.
We didn't see that she was a female Mordo agent earlier. We just see now that figure, who I described as looking exactly like Rorschach from Watchmen, on the bottom of page 5, we see that overcoat and hat and gloves sitting on a counter or a dresser or whatever in her room, and we see that it was actually this woman who was disguised as a man in a trench coat.
Okay, I had not realized that. Yes. And all of these 3 characters will eventually come back for a fantastic Roger Stern, Paul Smith issue much later on. We then get just an absolutely fantastic sequence of, I always love it how Ditko, when he is plotting and drawing Doctor Strange, shows him having to deal with mundane real-world impediments while also engaging in ectoplasmic skullduggery. And we have Strange has no way of taking off his mask and his metal mittens, and he is having to get around the castle while wearing these things by separating out his ectoplasmic form and having his encumbered human form come trudging along behind him. And then he gets in a fight on page 8, which is just beautifully done, how he is able to get in this fight that he can't see anything, and by using his ectoplasmic self.
So basically his ectoplasmic form is floating outside of his body, and his body isn't supposed to be able to do anything while that is out of his body, but they're somehow having him able to use his physical body as sort of like a puppet. That he's able to move around from outside. So it's almost like he's playing a video game of Doctor Strange in meat space.
Yes, this goes on. He finally gets away and is barely able to leap onto the next building. But when the issue ends, he is still shackled, but he has made it out onto the roof, and says, and yet, while a breath of life remains within me, I shall fight on. And we have our 13th cliffhanger in a row on this book. The storyline just never ends, which is a little bit wearying that with Paramordo and Dormammu out of action, that this storyline, they're wringing another 13th and 14th issue out of this storyline. But it is excellent work, and I can't complain. This is a harrowing issue. You really feel for Doctor Strange. He is in a lot of trouble, and it is just beautifully potted, beautifully penciled, and beautifully inked by Ditko.
Yes. Yeah. Things like what you were talking about, that mental probe that Doctor Strange was sort of using to then probe back against the other guy. I mean, getting that across, it's absolutely brilliant. And the last thing that I'll say about this is I think I've mentioned before that when you and I were trying to do that sci-fi adventure comic strip thing, that I had that one scene where he was leaping from a tower window to another thing, and people I'd show it to were like, can he fly? Like, I don't think someone could jump that far. Once again, I'm like, look at panel 2 on page 10 of this issue of Doctor Strange. Look, Steve Ditko does it here too. There's no way he can make that jump. So I just I'm feeling a little defensive.
Yes, I understand. Feeling a little salty.
That's right.
I say at the end of my notes, this is essentially chapter 13 of a 12-chapter story, which is pushing it, but it's a great comic.
Okay, so moving on to Tales of Suspense number 75, featuring Iron Man and Captain America. Iron Man gets the entire cover here, with Captain America only appearing in the corner box, and the title is The Fury of the Freak, and we see on the cover a bunch of cops. Pepper is being thrown off a ledge by the Freak, and Iron Man is acting all dramatic about trying to figure out what to do.
Cullen's feet are never his best feature, and Pepper's feet on the cover, the way her high heels are sticking out, not great. Cullen's specifically not good at shoes, and Pepper's shoes on the cover are not looking right.
It's funny. The artist who gets the worst reputation for drawing feet is Rob Liefeld. Whether that's fair or not, other folks have pointed out all these other artists who couldn't draw feet and found just more elegant ways to hide the fact. So
Steve Monkius said that he created the fish police. He wanted all his police to have fish bottoms so that he would never have to draw feet.
That was going to be my second example. But somebody pointed out that, what was that? I think Frank Frazetta? Like, if you look at all of his fantasy paintings, everyone's feet are like obscured by rubble or smoke or water, or it's like I think it was Frazetta. It's like one of those classic fantasy artists where it's like, yeah, no, it looks like he never drew a foot.
Yeah.
So Gene Colan's in good company. Yes. So the Freak is actually Happy Hogan, who was near death and had an experimental Tony Stark medical device tried on him, which Tony Stark knew was a bad idea, but everybody else was like, sure, let's try it, and turned him into the Freak, who looks like a cross between Frankenstein and the Watcher. Yes. So Iron Man is trying to figure out how to defeat this guy when he knows he's, his friend who helped save his life. So he's going back and forth about how he's going to do that. Meanwhile, his armor is running out of power because he was not able to fully charge it up last time he tried to do so.
We should say that this is titanically written by Stan Lee, tremendously drawn by Adam Austin, who is really Gene Colan, tumultuously inked by Gary Michaels, who is really Jack Abel, and is continuing to do an amazing job. This is a really beautifully inked issue. Timorously lettered by Sam Wilson.
So Iron Man collapses, I think because his power was running out, and the Freak just sort of, he's like, okay, maybe I don't destroy this guy. There's something in the back of my brain that says that, I shouldn't harm him any further. So the Freak then happens to wander into Stark's lab, where Senator Byrd has shown up and is trying to get access to Tony Stark and or Iron Man, and Pepper is trying to occupy him in the meantime. And that is, of course, when the Freak comes in and ends up throwing the Senator to the ground and abducting Pepper after she faints. And again, this is one of those pages where I really don't know that splash page was worth having be a splash page for Colan there.
There's a tremendous amount. First of all, her shoes look terrible, and second of all, there's a tremendous amount of dead space in this splash page. Like, you could literally just crop out the entire top fifth of the page, and no one would ever know.
Right, and the entire right like quarter of the page or something like that, and the entire bottom fifth of the page. Yeah, it's. I mean, if you're going to do a splash page for that, I could see making that work, but you got to do something with it. As I said, Gene Colan, he has a long career. He's fantastic on many things. Seems like there's some things that he's still working on here.
Yeah.
Even though he has been working in comics for a while, oftentimes, I mean, Kirby didn't really reach what Kirby would become for 20 years working in comics, something like that. So anyway, the Freak, in very much a kind of Frankenstein or King Kong type style here, picks Pepper up and walks towards an open window. There are a bunch of cops outside waiting for him, and they start shooting. And one of them says, "Careful, easy, don't hit the girl." But they apparently keep on firing, just like, "Oh, we'll just make sure not to hit her." So the Freak drops her, and Iron Man, who's still very weak, but of course his transistors were able to recharge a bit because apparently that's how things work. But he does have enough power to use his repulsor rays to break her fall.
Yeah, they go back and forth as to whether or not these repulsor rays are just like, lasers with piercing power, or whether they actually repulse things and could, break somebody's fall. This is...
I've usually I've never thought of them as lasers. I've always gotten the impression that either they are just destructive or they're basically concussive, that they will sort of push things like, it's a repulsor, it's repelling things. So I find it is somewhere in between concussion and a push. But anyway, Right now he's using it as a push. So Iron Man is trying to turn the device back on that turned Happy into the Freak, because something, it's going to turn him back into Happy Hogan. And we leave with a cliffhanger of Iron Man just about to collapse and trying to throw the switch and thinking he has failed and will not be able to save Happy.
Now, they haven't brought up in a long time that Happy, last time he was conscious, told Tony Stark, "I know your secret identity. I know Iron Man is Tony Stark." Then he hasn't been fully conscious ever since. But I assume that when he eventually becomes human again, that he is going to conveniently have amnesia and forget that. Or I don't know if they're going to try to... I don't think they ever give Jane amnesia. I don't think they ever give Gwen Talbot amnesia. They've been revealing a lot of secret identities recently, so maybe they'll just go forward with that. I don't remember. Certainly Iron Man is a character who has had long periods of time not had a secret identity. I don't remember how they go forward with that.
Yep. Neither do I. We will find out. So
we'll find out soon.
So we are moving on to the Captain America story here. 30 Minutes to Live, introducing Lee and Kirby's newest bombastic baddie, the block-busting Batroc. Where but at Mighty Marvel can such towering talent be assembled? Stan Lee script, Jack Kirby layouts, Dick Ayers pencil, not pencils, but pencil, Jay Tartaglione inks. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Tartaglione has been inking Dick Ayers over on Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos, and actually doing a really good job. I was surprised. We haven't been reading that for this podcast, but when I was reading it earlier myself, I was surprised at how much I really liked Dick Ayers when he's inked by other people, and John Tartaglione adds a bit of an edge to him that I really sort of like. So anyway, he's doing the inks, Artie Simek lettering, then Irving Forbush, cheerleader. Now, you have the scans that have more of the other stuff other than just the stories in them. I'm reading this on Marvel Unlimited. Has there been much stuff about Irving Forbush that has been mentioned? So that's something that I would be interested in you sort of mentioning when it comes up, just because that's part of what I like about going back and looking at this stuff is, those little things. Irving Forbush, the Mighty Marvel Marching Society, all these things that happen kind of not in the stories, but sort of in the fandom that Marvel is cultivating.
I gotta say, I really like this issue. I think that the Kirby Ayers Tartaglione art really looks nice right away on this splash page. I think it really looks like Kirby. This looks like, the Kirby of those three people. It's really the Kirby that comes shining through. And, obviously this is a legendary issue. We talked about how legendary Fantastic Four is this month, and this can hope to compare to that. But Batroc is one of the all-time great Captain America villains and one of my all-time personal favorite characters. And he gets a fantastic introduction in this issue. I had forgotten that Kirby was just on layouts because I think Kirby is associated with Batroc, not as much as he is associated with Silver Surfer and Galactus. But I think that when people think of Batroc, they think of him as being a great Kirby character. Indeed, I read this issue and I'm like going, yes, this feels like we're getting Kirby goodness with Batroc.
Although when John Romita draws Batroc in the next couple of months, oh boy, does that not work. But
I wouldn't say that. I like it, but
we'll get into that when it happens. I'm going to prove you wrong. So, as you pointed out last month, we last left off with Captain America parachuting safely down from the destroyed sleeper trilogy thingy, only to show up in this issue with him falling to his death because I guess that someone thought better of it? I don't know.
I should say that this issue is going to end up in the Marvel Enterprise books several places. There will be more as we come along, so I'll point out those then.
So earlier in March 1966 here, when we did Strange Tales, Matt pointed out that there was a mention of some other S.H.I.E.L.D. operation that was happening kind of off-panel about Inferno 42. Well, this is what it's referring to. So these are two different things S.H.I.E.L.D. is doing in the same month, and they are sort of acknowledging that. We see a demonstration by some ne'er-do-wells, but some, high-tech suited folks. We see a demonstration of what Inferno 42 will do to New York City, why they need to create a scale model of New York City and drop an actual little thing of this stuff in there to show how it blows the thing up. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's kind of like Dr. Evil's factory that makes models of little factories.
Yes.
So this is apparently some kind of substance which could be used for great harm. So some bad guys are looking to steal it. Meanwhile, we go back to Captain America. We see that he falls into the water and just tries to dive in, which he's able to do, but he falls unconscious. Fortunately, he's able to float to the surface, despite the fact that his suit is made maybe 1/4 of chainmail and the fact that he's holding on to a disc of steel. But fortunately, that does not weigh him down. They say that Captain America has no superpowers, but he is just at peak human abilities. What can peak human ability not do? Come on! So, anyway,
he has super floatiness powers.
Yes. Well, apparently not in World War II. Those must have come about later. So Cap is pulled aboard a dinghy by some American sailors who happen to be out there. And we then see him back at his... Let's see. I would assume he was living in the Avengers mansion. But on page 4, panel 1, he does not look like he is on a balcony in Avengers mansion. He looks way higher up than that. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Anyway, we see Captain America reminiscing about the war, about Bucky Barnes having died, about his old sergeant, and, various things. Between the final panel on page 4 and the first panel on page 5, somehow...
Wait. You've skipped over another no prize-worthy panel. So we have... the 5th panel of page 4, he's thinking about Bucky and he's thinking about his old sergeant, and then he thinks about, but there was one other. Our lives touched for only a short time, but I've never forgotten her. I can still remember her, our final date, when she whispered to me through trembling lips, I'll wait till you return, Steve, no matter how long, no matter what happens, I'll wait for you, my darling. But he thinks, but that was an eternity ago. In the dead past, the forgotten past, the past which will live with me forever. After all, I'm now... essentially a 20-year-old, and she would be a 40-year-old. Ugh.
Yeah. Well, let's just assume that she's moved on with her life. I mean, come on.
There is a new movie that is coming out soon with Adam Sandberg as a guy who is, in order to save his life, put in suspended animation, and he comes out and 40 years later, and he decides to resume his relationship with his girlfriend, who is now in her 80s and who will be played by Jean Smart. But
Jean Smart's having a nice having a nice second act of her career here. I really like that.
Yes. So this is the beginning of we talked about in the past when Captain America was fighting with an unspecified female agent in World War II, and was that one of the Carter sisters slash aunt, niece slash grandmother, granddaughter, and how that was unclear, and how she was, again, as an unnamed female agent. Well, here, this all starts up again. And it's starting up here in this panel here, and we'll pick up more of it as we go through this issue and see more no-prize panels.
Yes. Well, and something that looks like a no prize to me, although it doesn't really rise to that level, is, as I said, on the final panel on page 4, we see Captain America wearing red pajamas and white slippers with a purple robe over it. And then in the next panel, we see his purple robe is still on. He's just now taking it off, but he has no pajamas under there. He's wearing his Captain America outfit, and apparently his Captain America outfit is footy pajamas. So
Yes.
how he got his jammies off in the meantime is a mystery. We see how unbelievable it is that he's supposedly able to walk around with his shield under his suit jacket on panel 4 on page 5. But he goes ahead and suits up and heads out into the street, and just happens to run into a woman that looks very familiar, thinking, hey, she looks just like that woman I just happened to be thinking about just now. But maybe I'm just imagining it.
But the girl I was thinking of would be a hideous old hag by this point, into her 40s, and this girl is young and beautiful, so she can't possibly be the hideous hag I was thinking of. So we have a mystery here that will be solved.
So he then starts following her, and almost sort of, well, if it's much longer than these 2 panels, it would have been kind of creepy and stalkery. But as it is, it's just a couple of panels. He's like still watching her. He sees her collide with somebody, and they drop some packages and happen to swap the packages. And he notices this and is trying to warn her, hey, this guy just stole something from you. She's like, look, dude, you must be mistaken. I have the thing I am supposed to have. Walk on.
She says, look, I appreciate your concern, but you are mistaken. This is my package. Now, why don't you just forget the whole thing? Ixnay on the package pay.
And so then he's like, there must be something more here than meets the eye, basically.
There's more to this than I guessed. She's in league with that joker.
Yes.
What is it all about? What was in the package?
Oh, don't worry, we're going to find out. So the man that she collided with keeps on moving down the road with this package in hand. Batroc then finds him and gives him a serious wallop by jumping on him horizontally, basically.
You haven't described who Batroc is.
Yes, Batroc is a Frenchman, works with the bad guys. He says, ha! Surely, mon ami, you did not think a mere agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. could keep the Inferno 42 from Batroc the Leaper. And then he, of course, says lots of Sacre Bleu and Zut Alors and all sorts of stuff like that. He is, and twirls his little handlebar mustache. He is very entertaining.
Yes.
So Batroc subdues this guy and finds out that no, this was a decoy, that he must have ditched the package somewhere else to be picked up by someone else. So then he's like, wait a minute, that woman he collided with, maybe that's it. But the woman that Steve Rogers has interacted with here, who has the package, seems to think he looks familiar too, but it's just from stories that her sister or aunt or grandmother or great aunt or fill in the blank told her, which is sort of hard to believe that she would recognize a guy from just stories that were being told, but let's just assume there was a photo or two. Right?
Yes, he says, I've got to stop thinking that way, clutching at straws whenever I see a girl who looks like her. And she thinks I almost made a fool of myself. Sis had told me so often of the boy she knew in World War II, but he'd be much older by now. It couldn't have been him. What would he have thought if I'd asked him, is your name Steve Rogers? Yes, so this is our first sighting of Sharon Carter. This is the first appearance of Sharon Carter, who at first is Peggy Carter's younger sister. We never got confirmed. The unnamed agent that Cap was fighting with a couple of issues ago in World War II was Peggy Carter. That was an unnamed agent. Here, Sharon Carter will also be an unnamed agent for a long time. She will just be called Agent 13, but it will eventually be determined that that was Peggy Carter in the earlier issue, that this is an agent named Sharon Carter here, both S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. So she says sis. So at first, this point, she is presumably the much younger sister of Peggy Carter. And eventually this will be changed as the timeline lengthens.
Yeah, and it just gets confusing. And as I think we mentioned in an earlier episode, there was an Agent X-23 or something like that in the old Golden Age comics that presumably would have been Peggy Carter, but then in later stories, she then becomes, I think, called Betsy Ross and becomes a superhero called Golden Girl. So then that makes it all more confusing. Anyway, yes, this will be perpetually confusing from now until eternity. So Steve Rogers basically hears Batroc attack Sharon Carter, and so he slips into a blind alleyway and comes back out as Captain America to try and fight him. So then Batroc kicks him, knocks him off his feet, and Captain America is able to recognize the fighting style. He says, "Batroc the Leaper, eh? A master of la savate, the French art of boxing with the feet." And Batroc says, "I salute you, mon capitaine. Your knowledge is almost the equal of your fame." I had thought that the La Savate or La Savate or whatever it is had been added later by people who were like, what's up with this French dude who kicks people? But no, it was right there from the beginning. Whether or not his moves look anything like the actual French martial art of Savate or Savate or whatever it's called, I have no idea. I doubt it. But then Sharon Carter is trying to use a moment to reclaim her gun, and then Batroc steps on it and shatters her gun, which is odd. Not quite sure how that happens, but not quite as odd as the next panel. So page 9, panel 3. We have a panel where Captain America is just knocking the crap out of Batroc with a huge roundhouse. And it looks really awesome at first glance. You should not glance at it more than a moment, because the longer you look at it, the more disturbing and weird and unexplainable it becomes. So,
where is his butt?
Well, is that his butt or is that his crotch? Is that his right foot or his left foot? Is his foot kicking Batroc or is his fist punching Batroc? Where is Captain America's head? What is and whether he's punching or kicking Batroc, it's clear that it was right in the nads. It was so this I find this panel utterly fascinating for all the wrong reasons. But once again, this is probably something between the Kirby layouts, Ayers pencils, Tartaglione inks.
Yeah.
Something got lost somewhere in that game of telephone, and we ended up with this. So while Captain America and Batroc finish up their confrontation, Sharon Carter is able to sneak off with her package and goes through a trap brick wall in order to get off the street.
So her Inferno 42 package has gotten ruptured in all this and is glowing, and it is glowing so brightly that we can see Batroc and Captain America see it glowing from 4 blocks away on page 10. But then we get to her, who is holding this thing that is glowing so brightly that it can be seen from 4 blocks away, and she does not notice. She does not notice that the thing in her arms is glowing that brightly, which is a little silly.
And as she walks into that dark room, it doesn't seem to be illuminating the room at all either. A really, really fun issue. I really enjoyed this one. And it's great to see Sharon Carter brought into this. It's great to have, as you it sounds like you've been a bigger fan of Batroc over the years than me, but yes, he's a fun character and it's great. It's good to see him come into this. Yeah, we're making progress on these characters. You know, as I was saying in a recent issue, it really seems that the Marvel Universe has become really what it will be. And so this is like it going through its late adolescence here, basically, as it's doing its last growth spurt before becoming what its mature self will be.
Yes.
This was a great step in that process.
I think I fell in love with Batroc the Leaper when there was a great Roger Stern, John Byrne, Batroc the Leaper, or Mr. Hyde, Captain America's story, in I think issues 251 and 252. Batroc does show up in the MCU. He was one of the villains in Captain America the Winter Soldier, and then also was one of the villains in the Winter Soldier and Falcon TV show. And I just love him. I think he has one of the biggest personalities of any Marvel character. And I love the Savate. I love the kicking. I love his French martial arts. But I just love this character, and I just love this issue. I think, to get Sharon Carter and in retroactively Peggy Carter and Batroc all introduced in the same issue, it should be a bad issue with the combination of Kirby, Ayers, and Tartaglione, but it looks beautiful. I think this is just a fantastic issue. I love it.
It looks beautiful with the exception of that one panel. Which, actually, don't get me wrong. It actually does look beautiful, come to think of it. It's just, you just don't think about it. Just move on.
Don't think about it. Yes.
Go on.
Okay, that brings us to Avengers number 26. No, your eyes are not deceiving you. You are looking at the wonderful Wasp, but don't dare miss the startling surprises inside. But of course, if you've read Tales of Astonishment this month, you've already seen her come back in the Namor storyline. The Wasp always wears a different costume, but this one's is this a new costume or is that just a bathing suit? Well, it turns out it is just a bathing suit. They also color her wings oddly in this issue, so it looks like on the cover, she's got fleshy wings, which is very disturbing. Is that how it's colored on yours? Do they look like fleshy wings?
Yeah, they're kind of peach colored. They're a little darker than her skin tone, but not by much.
Yeah, I find that disturbing. They look like giant skin flaps that she's flapping around on. So we have incredible story by Stan Lee, inconceivable art by Don Heck, indescribable inking by Frank Ray. I think I feel like for each of the last 10 issues, we've had a different inker on Don Heck, and now Frank Ray gets his turn. He is a good inker, but he is doing his best with Heck, but is somewhat struggling with him. Indelible lettering by Artie Simek. You don't catch us breaking up a winning combo, but then you have I feel like Heck has been doing more and more gadgetry on the walls of Avengers Mansion with every issue, and the gadgetry has gotten so mammoth by the splash page of this issue. It's basically cropping the 4 Avengers out of the page as they are being loomed over by this huge, extremely complicated machinery. We have, once again, Captain America working with the Avengers, showing them a new gadget, and then, of course, the Avengers get in a fight. I gotta tell you, I am just very glad to see the cover of this issue, because I'm just very tired of this group of Avengers. It's a tiny group. It's only 4 people: Captain America, Hawkeye, Quicksilver, and Scarlet Witch. And they keep fighting that none of them like each other, except for Scarlet Witch, in Captain America. That's the only one where people like each other. And they keep getting in fights, and I'm always like, wait, is this a fake fight or is this a real fight? Well, in this case, it's a pretty real fight. And they're fighting. Hawkeye storms out. We then cut to Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne out in the middle of the ocean. She shrinks down. I think they say at some point this is not a costume. This is just a bathing suit. But it's a unstable molecules bathing suit. So then she shrinks down. But then she decides to fly from their... Is this a platform or a ship somewhere out in the middle of the ocean? She decides to fly all the way back to the mainland, but realizes I'm not strong enough to do that. So then she decides, I'm just going to float in the ocean for a while and relax. I don't think it's that relaxing to be floating in the middle of the ocean.
Also, on page 5, panel 7, where she's floating, she's standing. That is not a floating position whatsoever. Notice the shadow of her left leg onto her right leg. If you're floating, you're not going to be casting that shadow. And her hair does not look like it's floating in the water at all. He just drew a picture of her standing up, just drew it at a weird angle, and then just drew water around it. That bothers me.
So then it just so happens she's floating above Atuma, who is like, hey, this must be a spy who is floating above me, given that there is no logical reason someone would just do that, which he's right about. So then he sucks her down into his ship. This is, of course, the second time Atuma has sucked the Wasp into his ship. He did so way back in Tales to Astonish number 64. And he is, once again... Does he have an actual model of a city here, or is he just conjuring this up in his mind's eye?
I think this is just his description of what's happening. This is not a model.
And then he explains to her that he is going to take over. She, and this is good, once again, with flesh-colored wings on her back, looking like she's got giant skin flaps flapping around, which is not pleasant.
Okay, Matt, could we rethink the term giant skin flaps? That is really freaking me out, man.
That's freaking me out. I'm sharing my freak out with the world here. This is freaking coloring. And so then I always like it when damsels in distress get to show a little bit of agency, and she does manage to get out and then use their communicator to a nice panel on the bottom of page 8 of her inside the machinery. I always like it when they show Ant-Man and Wasp inside machinery.
Although she does have to say, thank heavens, Hank used to spend time teaching me the fundamentals of electrocommunications. Otherwise, I might not have recognized this apparatus. Which, that actually kind of makes sense plot-wise, but once again, why do you always have to have, good thing I listened to a man earlier because that's going to allow me to do this stuff. Also, you haven't mentioned the whole thing about what the atmosphere is like in this thing yet, right?
Yeah, this is very bizarre. They've decided that the Atlanteans need to breathe water, but when they're in their own ships, they don't just have them filled with water, they have them filled with very moist air. You can briefly have humans and Atlanteans in the same environment with the Atlanteans and humans just breathing the same moist air, and then eventually you have to put a helmet on the humans. It's all very confusing.
They should really start recruiting heroes from New Orleans or maybe Miami, and then they would probably be able to get along just fine inside these ships.
Yes, high moisture cities. So then she manages to contact the Avengers. We now get Hawkeye, who is surrounded by showgirls and who is really enjoying himself. And then I guess he's handing around to them his H ring. He's got a ring with a big H on it, which I guess was how they were going to contact him. So the way he communicates with the Avengers is he's got a big honkin' H ring on his hand that he uses to communicate with the Avengers, but now it's off his hand, so he loses it. So then the meager 3 Avengers fly out to rescue the Wasp. They, too, get sucked up into Atuma's ship. They have a big old fight. I always think Atuma is fine. He's a perfectly fine villain. He's threatening. He's intimidating. He's got good gadgetry. Sure, why not? Then he defeats the Avengers, but one of his soldiers says, "We have heard whispers among the warriors, sire. They say Atuma conquers foes who are already defeated because they cannot breathe their air." And then Atuma says, "What, you dare accuse me of cowardice? I, the mightiest of all, revive the prisoners, put helmets on them that they may breathe, then bring them hence. I'll slay them all single-handed." So, once again, the villain has the advantage, but loses it because his pride is insulted. And he is fighting them all, one by one, in his little arena here. Eventually, they decide, shouldn't we flood this thing to give them a little bit of advantage? And they do. Meanwhile, Hawkeye comes back, realizes the Avengers are out somewhere, decides to turn on the subliminal recall inducer to try to figure out where they are, and then a mysterious person enters Avengers Mansion, and the issue ends. I was going to say perfectly fine. Perfectly fine is too much of a compliment. It is a poorly drawn, adequately plotted issue. The fact that this whole thing happens just because the Wasp happened to decide to float in the ocean over Atuma's ship is poor plotting. The ways in which Hawkeye misses the signal is poor plotting, just in terms of getting away to get the Avengers to fight Atuma for 10 pages. Sure, why not? It works. Okay.
The whole thing with Hawkeye, ignoring the whole idea that he's just in some kind of nightclub surrounded by showgirls, apropos of nothing. At the beginning of the issue, the gadget that Captain America was showing them was this new secure method for sharing messages in case you need to leave a message for someone. It's this thing where you have to remember a password and all this sort of stuff, all the nightmare crap that we have to deal with in 2023. So that's what was going wrong when Hawkeye came back and was looking for the message, and he's like, "Oh wait, I can't remember my password." And so the I forgot my password thing is that subliminal recall inducer that they go to. No, don't go down that road, folks. We're there already, and it's not fun. Just leave a note. Just leave a note.
Always leave a note.
Always leave a note. All right. Once again, not the best issue to end on here, but it is what it is.
We always end on Avengers, and it is never the best issue to end on. Heck took over with issue 9, I think. We're currently on issue 26, and he is going to stay on until issue 40. So, never the best book. Eventually, it will become a great book again when John Buscema takes over.
Yes.
All right. Well, Steve, that is it for March 1966. I think there have been a lot of great books this month. There have been some weaker books this month. It is one of the most legendary months in all Marvel Comics due to the first appearance of Silver Surfer and Galactus, and that issue could not have lived up to its legendary status more. Absolutely gorgeous issue. If only Sinnott had inked all 9 books this month, But alas, he did not.
The Hulk story had his secret identity being revealed. Yeah, we've had lots of very substantial things happening here in the Marvel Universe this month. The Plunderer gets his white and blue uniform.
Oh, that's huge.
That's enormous. And but we also get Sharon Carter. So
yes.
Lots of and Batroc. There is some chaff to sort out from the wheat here, but we have but the wheat is really good.
Yes, good wheat. Good wheat, Marvel Comics.
So yeah, good month, and we are continuing on to more good stuff next month.
Yes, exciting. Okay, fantastic. All right, see you later, everybody. Bye.
Take care. Bye. Stay safe out there. Thanks for listening to Marvel Reread Club. Please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Your reviews and ratings are a great help and always appreciated. We love hearing from you. Go to marvelrereadclub.com to find notes and join the discussion about this episode. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. See you next time.